All right, so welcome to another Impact Millionaire podcast episode. I know, again, it's been a long time. I really have to get this thing going. I don't know how I'm not able to fit it in my schedule, but it turns out that trying to grow a company and then also at the same time launch a podcast is not easy. And especially if I don't want to just put out stuff that I can't be proud of. To be fair with you guys, I have recorded a couple of episodes and then I watched them and like listened to them and I was like, no, that's not it. So anyway, today is one that I'm super duper proud of because today I'm super thrilled to introduce you guys to somebody who, in my mind at least, is already at least an impact millionaire. So Koen is a Belgian lecturer, researcher, author, speaker, and Global Prize 2017 and 2018 finalist. He's passionate about technology, enhanced and collaborative learning. In 2015, he launched a Kakuma project in which 100 global educators offer free education to African refugees via Skype. He also launched global educational projects involving 250 schools over 69 countries in which students focus on UN SDGs. His climate action project was supported by the Dalai Lama, UNESCO, Greenpeace, and currently is a movement of 2.5 million members strong and growing. So definitely a super inspiring guy. What I find most inspiring about Koen is that he's not sitting around and waiting till all the conditions are right. He really is somebody that understands the urgency of just acting and just starting to do something. And so what he's been able to do with the limited resources that he has and still has today and still is able to do is absolutely inspiring, because it really, to me, the main lesson from Koen is that if you want something bad enough, if you really believe that the impact is important to have, it's just a matter of getting started and starting to do things. And I have no doubt in my mind that we will, today Koen's an impact millionaire, but he's definitely somebody that I see becoming an impact billionaire and impacting a billion people's lives positively. So it was an absolute honor speaking with him. I'm very excited, and I'm very excited for you to hear this conversation as well. So without further ado, let's just dive into that conversation. Hello, Koen. Welcome to the Impact Billionaires podcast. We're very excited to have you because I think you are at least an impact millionaire, if not a billionaire already. So yeah, welcome. I think what I will have done before we start this is give a bit of an introduction of who you are and what you do. But maybe it would be interesting for the listeners to get your perspective still on like what drives you, who is Koen, like what are you all about? What's your main focus right now?
Yeah, as a teacher, I'd like to bring change on a global scale, bottom up, basically, sometimes top down as well. I think that the quality education can lead to a greater whole, and that we are focusing too much on knowledge sometimes. And through certain ways, I think we can tackle big issues like climate change and poverty, refugees, those kind of things I've been trying to tackle during the past years, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you get to that point where you like, okay, there's too much focus on knowledge, I want to change this? Like, when is that a conscious decision that you made, or is that a question that came across your path, or like when do you?
So I think there's always a trigger. And for me, that was like 20 years ago, just coming from school, being selected to go to South Africa and there being confronted with poverty. I think that was certainly a huge trigger for me. Always wanted to help people, but not just by donating money as well, more like giving expertise and trying to set things up. And another thing is research as well. When you go through articles and research and academical facts, you're confronted when it comes to education to two different alleys, two different directions, in which one is really stating that knowledge is the main thing, is the most important thing, which goes through teachers who have to instruct, etc. And the other one is more, that's certainly not the way to go. We have to focus on skills and creativity and critical thinking, empathy, those kind of things, the opposite way, basically. And the interesting part is that you can see that different countries are going into the different directions as well. So like in the UK and Belgium, it's more like knowledge driven, while in India and Canada, it's more like going into the other directions. It's interesting stuff, complicated as well, especially for teachers, I think. So how to know what is the right direction. Yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. So you, in that sense, you start looking at, okay, there's different ways of tackling this. But then, if I understand it, like the first project that you do is still up and running. There's like a movement, a climate movement that you started that has like 2.5 million followers. So there's this one part where you start, like, where you realize, okay, I want to do something about this. I'm triggered. How do you go from there to scaling that in the way that you already did?
The thing you have to know is that you have to start from the knowledge that nobody is interested in what you're doing, except maybe for like friends and family. But apart from that, it's really a struggle to make sure that people know what you're doing, that they know that, and that they are able to support you. So that's basically the starting point. What worked for me is I was selected to be part of like the Global Teacher Prize, which brought me together with a lot of famous people, but with a lot of interesting and inspiring people. Made me part of a huge network as well. But what is really important is to know that you have to reach out to media. Media is crucial. If you want people to know what you're doing, you have to go through newspapers, radio, television, etc., which is complicated. But once your story has been covered, it's quite easy to be covered by media. Another thing is that you have to involve celebrities, public figures as well, which can be royalty, government leaders, but also actors, activists, etc. And that goes together with media. Celebrities are interested in media if media is involved, and vice versa, basically. But that is really important, those two factors, to make sure that you're able to scale up from a few thousands to a few millions, I think. But basically, it has to be a good message as well, obviously. What I did is creating a global network of teachers, not of students, but teachers. And we always try to reach our students through those teachers. And you can be impressed by 2.5 million students, but if you take a look at, or you focus on just one nation, one country, that's still just peanuts, basically. So there's still a lot of room for improvement. Still, we can grow a lot. But it's interesting what happens when you bring together people who are really passionate about doing something more than just teaching their own students, willing to do more than just the curriculum, the national curriculum, and who are willing to tackle those global issues. That is really interesting to see, because everybody who's joining us is doing much more than just participating. They are the ones who reach out to their press and presidents, and they make the project grow, basically. So it's not making advantage of a community, it's more like community driven even. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that is really interesting for me. Every day I'm learning about this as well, but it's really interesting to see how this goes. And the main thing for me is that it's both in going in both directions. We give them some responsibility, the people in the community, but they are the ones to shine in their newspaper when it comes in their country and in the news. When it's covered by television or radio, I think it has to focus on them and their students and not on the project in general and me. And that really works. Yeah, that brings like-minded people together. Yeah.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that one of the most important questions that you're constantly maybe asking yourself is like, how can I empower my community? Would that be a fair question that you're asking yourself, or would you phrase it differently?
I don't think they need to empower. Yeah, maybe we need to show them the way. Everybody has to go through the same route. You have to learn how to do this. And we're basically showing them lots of things. We show them how to teach about it, how to guide other teachers, how to approach government leaders and media, how to convince society, etc. So that is basically, yeah, maybe we are empowering them. Depending on the teacher, I think if it's a teacher who has been participating for one or a few years, it's different as for new teachers, indeed. Yeah, yeah.
All right. And so within that, what's interesting to me as well is how do you look at impact in that sense? Do you feel like you are having a big impact, or do you feel like it's like the community combination? Is there a way that you measure the impact? What is the role of impact within that community?
So basically, first thing is like more like the stories, the anecdotes, like teachers who claim like in Ireland they brought national change with the need for waste management. They received a letter from their president. In Malawi they planted 60 million trees. So that can be a good indicator for like impact, the amount of trees planted. This is really complicated. And in some countries they've been doing inventions, brought real change through solutions. They took meaningful actions as well. So that was the first stage, I think, the good stories, which media really love. They like to cover those. And this is a certain kind of impact as well. Another way to measure impact may be like just the amount of participants, both teachers, schools, and the amount of ministries of education involved, etc., or the amount of partnerships with WWF, with UNEP, which is the UN, with NASA, etc. But I always thought like we need to measure the impact through research, basically. We need to team up with a university and they're going to do research and write a paper about it. But that would be the educational part of the project, which I have been focusing on too much, I think. What would be a better approach, which I started to realize a few months ago or half a year ago, is that we probably can measure impact in a better way through climate, like the amount of carbon avoided, which is a universal metric, basically. That's why we are planning to create an app with some kind of a carbon footprint calculator, but not like the ones which are already there. This would be like an app which is like a personal buddy of the students who and they are able to select actions they've been taking, because it's not about learning about climate change. It's more than that. It's also learning about it and gaining knowledge about what's happening, the causes, effects, and solutions for climate. But the real deal, the essence basically is like the change of behavior. And how to measure the change of behavior? Well, I think the app would help with that. It would show like, this is the amount we have been avoided in those countries with this certain amount of participants. And then in phase 2, it would be nice to have like students who are able to do this together. It would be like a pen pal principle as well. You have a friend in another continent speaking the same language, almost the same age, and you're able to do that together. Like you have some targets which you are going to beat, the two of you. Not really like a competition, but more like a collaboration, because collaboration is key, and it's always nice to have friends in other continents. And it would be interesting to beat climate change, but becoming friends as well, and learn to appreciate each other's culture as well. So it would be a win-win, an intercultural exchange, but also on the same mission for climate. And I think that youth would be really thrilled about that. And the next phase would be more like the win-win, because it's complicated. It's always for us just to say, okay, I'm not going to eat red meat anymore. I'm going to school by bike rather than car. That's quite easy for us to say if you have food and if you have and you have a car. But for like certain parts of the world, and that's basically many continents, students aren't that lucky. So it's Maslow as well. Why would they use an app to do that if they don't even have like quality education or like food? But there has to be part of the app a win-win, in which organizations are able to sponsor the app. They will get reports, maybe even like certificates, the carbon certificates. And part of that money goes to those who need it, to support them so that they are able to bring change in their country as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you touched upon an interesting point in the beginning as well. Like, I think there's two things I want to get back to but I'm going to first start with, you speak about the being able to measure through like CO2, for example, the difference that would have been caused by the actions happening. But I always think that's such a difficult one, because how do you measure something that hasn't happened? You know what I mean? So either the behavior change happens and then there's an effect, but how do you know that effect is bigger or as big as it would? I think that's one of the hard things about impact. And so I'm wondering if you have any ideas on if we should worry about that when we're trying to have an impact, being able to measure it, and how we would deal with that inherent problem of impact being that you can't measure the situation where you didn't do your action, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think you do. I think you are able to measure the impacts of avoiding something. So normally I would have gone to school by for sure. And now 3 days a week I go by bike because of these new insights. I think that is something you can measure. The tricky part is proving it, how to prove that somebody claims not to take a flight and that they really did it. I think that's something different than like just planting a tree. Those can come with certificates. So that's a different thing for sure, yeah. Planting a tree is really taking action with some kind of solution which will decrease the amount, which is different than avoiding for sure, yeah. Yeah.
And then you also spoke about Maslow, right? And I think that's something that I'm actually very eager and passionate about as well, is being able to like provide a baseline across the entire globe of the lowest needs in the very beginning. Now I'm working on this AI farm that is trying to create free food for everybody all across the world. So do you see education, like how do you see education play into that vision as well? What is your hope for education to play in the role of elevating society into that next level of Maslow?
Yeah, I think education is crucial, really crucial. Project Drawdown is researchers have been working on the causes, effects of climate change. And number 6 as a solution is like educating girls to avoid climate change. I've been building a school in a refugee camp myself. In the refugee camp, they have 200,000 people. 55% of them are children. And they have 50 schools only, basically, with classrooms up to 200 students in one classroom. No electricity, no internet, no pens, no paper, textbooks, nothing. And only one in three teachers is certified to teach. So it's really not the best level of education over there. But what we see is that while many people are born in the camp because it's already there for 30 years, most people will be living over there for the rest of their lives. Sure, they will not be able to leave that camp, except for those who are highly educated. We noticed that some of the teachers we have been training were sent to Georgia and the United States, for example. So they're the lucky ones. It's more like a lottery for them. But education is crucial in those kind of circumstances. We built our own school over there. The thing is that we want to train teachers, but also have virtual interactions between classrooms in every continent with those refugees. And we also did a small ICT club because we brought 100 laptops over there. And I think 2 weeks ago, I got a message through LinkedIn from students who said, yeah, I spotted myself on your picture on LinkedIn. I was one of those students who was there last year when you were teaching about computers. And now I'm going to university and I'm taking a course ICT. So that's direct impact, basically. So that is a case of bringing direct change, and education is important. And for him, it will be the way to get out of that camp. But also, I think education is important to fight polarization, to give people insight, to make sure that's more than just bullying on social media, to know that it's, why to take the right choices as well. It's really complicated, education. Nobody knows what's the best way, but I'm really convinced that it is crucial to make sure that people have better ways of living, basically. Also, what is interesting is that the complicated part about climate change is that I didn't find a full circle yet. Let me give you an example. I found a machine. So let me go back. So when I was in this refugee camp in Kenya, 1 year ago, exactly 1 year ago, just before COVID. I noticed that, and we were there to build a school. I noticed that people were burning plastic at every corner of the street, basically. So that's bad for the environment, okay? But I found a machine which is able to recycle plastic and create new stuff like bowls, cutlery, things they don't have right now, or even like tiles and bricks. So they're able to build houses with it. And that allows to give a salary to 4 people over there to make money to sell those objects which are created from waste. That is a full circle. So rather than burning plastic and pollution, they are creating something new which they can sell, which they can make a living of. So that is a full circle. And I haven't found that circle with climate change yet with our project. I think what we can do is change behavior and avoid carbon and make sure that students are able to, that they know what's happening, that they are able to reach out to government leaders. I think they can do more than yelling and going on a strike. They already have the passion, but what I want is that they know how to do this, that they know how to change life, that they know to inspire other people, and that they have the right data to do that, and not just like stories or yelling. But what would students in India or like in refugee camps, why would they care about climate change? They have other concerns. Still, I met young girls in this camp who are focusing on climate change. I was really impressed by that. They are learning about it and they are concerned about it, although they just have one meal a day and drink once a day. Yeah.
Wow. That must be super inspiring indeed, that is what they are focusing on. Yeah, but I agree. If you're worrying about that next meal, it's really hard to worry about, oh no, I'm not supposed to burn this plastic. And that's why I think that I really believe in creating, again, like a system and finding those levers to really like uplift an entire system and make sure that we then can like all together worry about those issues. Because what I hear very often in like the climate change debate, especially because I'm in the tech circles, we'll figure it out. We always do. We will figure out some technology that will make it happen. But I think our big issue today is time, and we don't really have that much time anymore. So that's why I think we need to come at it from all angles. And that's why I'm so inspired by your project as well, because I think that's a completely different angle than the one that I'm looking at. But we need all of them, again, to create that full circle. I don't think it's one, it won't be one entity or one idea or one project making the difference.
Well, it for sure, it's the cheapest way to adapt or mitigate climate change. If you know how much money people are spending on it, and it's just like really expensive to work on climate change, to change factories and organizations. So this is probably the cheapest way to bring change. But we're working on the top down as well. Last year we started to work with ministries of education. We're trying to bring climate literacy on national agendas and curriculums. We are now working towards COP26, which is in October with the UN, where every world leader will come together basically and focus on climate change. And we are trying to make that discussion, climate literacy, on the agenda. We are working with a few organizations on that, but basically at this time, at this moment, just one country in the whole world has climate literacy, and that is officially, and that is Italy. But that was more like a marketing stunt.
Oh no!
But we are working on that. We worked on our own curriculum with WWF, available in 15 different languages. So we are trying to make sure that this will be part of a national curriculum as well. And obviously, when you work top down, you're able to reach more people. What we are trying to do now is to bring 3 large cities on board, which may be like Johannesburg, Buenos Aires, maybe London, and maybe Amsterdam. But if we have all of those schools, like London has 3,000 schools, if we have all of them on board, that would be instantly like a lot of people,
Yeah.
500,000 or so. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're very busy on many different fronts. Like I think you also wrote a book or a couple of books, and then you have the refugee camps, you have the climate. How do you keep a focus, or how do you manage your time in order to have that big of an impact on those different fronts?
The first idea was like, let's do every refugee camp. Let's build schools in every of those camps, but you have to really focus on one thing, I think. I know that with the funding we have right now, which is practically zero, we just have to focus on this one school and this one refugee camp, which is changing thousands of people's of lives. It's just like that. We don't have the capacity to do more. And then last year, I had to make decision as well that this project with the refugees is more like a passion project, a personal project, and that the climate action project is really something I want to grow to 10 million this year, 50 million next year, something like that, and ultimately try to reach a billion people on Earth. And I'm pretty sure we can do that. All we have to do is make the right partnerships, and also we need to find for this as well, because the way it has been going through the past years is not really sustainable. It's more like me teaching full time and then salary to pay all of the costs. So many large organizations are partner and even using this project for their own marketing, but they are not really paying, or they aren't paying. Let's put it like that. That is still something to be solved. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if I understand it, I could maybe break down your strategy of having impact, of focus on something, do that very good, make sure that you can really have an impact on that, and then scale that through the network. The thing that you spoke about before of getting that media coverage, getting those things out there, because you have something so good, it will inspire other people and other people will join in on that. Which is, I think it's a brilliant strategy if you want to have impact, is that you can really, for the listeners as well, if they're thinking about their impact project, just try to think of something very small, maybe not the whole world altogether.
But you need to deliver quality as well. So the main thing is that we know that this is good quality. Teachers working with their students in a very different approach, not really, okay, paper and start noting, and this is climate change, and I want you to remember this definition, because when we have our assessment, I want you to have A's. No, what we do is, okay, let's listen to the children, let's create something. We try to come up with some activities. Create your own bioplastic with just milk and vinegar. We try to find activities everybody is able to do, even during lockdowns. We guide those teachers how to do this. And we started with 10 schools. I did this with 10 schools 5 years ago, and then 50 schools, and then 250 schools, and then 1,000. So it has been growing. It's not from the very beginning with 2.5 million participants. We found a certain structure as well. Those teachers who have been there from the very beginning and still interested and still teaching, they are the ones who are called facilitators now. So they have their 100 teachers guiding them in their own language. So we have, and that is necessarily because when you want to reach students in Latin America, you really have to make sure that the project is in Spanish. If you want to reach people in Africa, you need to make sure that's not through a website, WhatsApp. That's the only tool which is really working well over there. When you want to have people in China on board, you have to use WeChat, which is basically the only app they're able to use. So you cannot use social media in China. You cannot use your own website. It has to go through groups and those kind of channels. So you always have to find the best ways. Like Russia, English is not really an option. It has to be in Russian. For them, it's really complicated as well. There's a huge gap between the wealthy ones and those who are not really wealthy. It's complicated to find ways which work for everybody. But I find that we are accomplishing to do that for the last 2 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so that is by really understanding what it means to have an impact in that particular situation. Like, for example, language can be a barrier, but you also have other barriers, the channels that they're living on. So that's very important too.
It's technology, it's politics. Interesting part in America, the Trump states, they were not allowed to join the project even. They were not allowed by government, by school boards.
Wow.
Which was, you're not allowed. Yeah, really. So some of the teachers, they started to do week one of the project and they had to stop from their schools. Also, the interesting part is it's a nice anecdote. We once did a project about how people are all equal and how to make sure that we are not building a wall between Mexico and the US. So that was the thing about the project. And the interesting part is that some countries like Lebanon, the teacher was not allowed to join because we already had a teacher from Israel. Yeah. So it was about that part, exactly that part, like we are all the same, let's just work together. And they were just by law, they were not allowed to participate. So those things happen, yeah.
So sad, so ironic, so sad.
Yeah, ironic, yeah.
Yeah. All right, going into a different direction now, maybe it's like, what would you say is your current biggest challenge and how are you looking at it? Like, how do you help yourself frame it in order that you don't feel overwhelmed by it?
The largest challenge basically right now is funding, trying to find, because there's so many different routes. There's crowdfunding. Our network is a network of teachers. I don't want to beg for money from them. There's a huge gap between certain countries in Europe and the US, and then basically in Africa and Asian countries. And yeah, so it's a mess. So crowdfunding, I try not to do too much. I only did it to be able to build that school in the refugee camp. But it's not really working for the Climate Action Project. Then there's the huge grants by the European Commission and by the UN, etc., which is really complicated. Those are the like 1 million grants, but you have to be with really large partnerships. And it's basically a game. I found that time it's not really like allies being an ally. At that moment is more, yeah, people don't want you to be part of it because they see you as more like a threat because you're doing the same, trying to combat climate change, but it's a grant and they don't want you to get it. It's really, yeah, it's bad stuff. Then there is foundations. You always need to have a direct in. If you just apply for like a grant from a foundation, it will lead to nowhere basically if you don't have a direct contact in that foundation. It's always also a game basically of that. And then what's left is like CSR, corporate social responsibility, organizations willing to give money rather than taxes going to you to do something good. And we're working on that part right now. You have to be careful that it's not greenwashing, that they are doing it for the right reason. If they're doing it for marketing, so be it. If they want to just be able to put your icon, your logo at their website, that's fine. At least they're helping us. So that part I'm working on right now, and that is quite a struggle, I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah. What makes it hard?
So there's two things. There's one thing is, okay, I'm teaching and I'm using my salary to pay for my own capacity, which is fine. It's just like a hobby, something like that. But having 2.5 million participants, it requires a full-time of one's attention. It's just impossible to combine a full-time job with making sure that the website is good, that the curriculum is ready, is translated to all of those languages, that you're coordinating, that everything is perfect. This year I started in June while the project was in October. But the bad thing was that, yeah, if you have to pay for your own costs, like 2.5 million people, that requires quite a server, and you need certain technology to do a webinar and certain technology to reach everybody. So that is going to thousands of dollars. If you have to pay that yourself, that doesn't really make any sense. It is really a different world, fundraising. It is really a world in which you have to do it. For example, I was thinking like, okay, let's approach UNESCO and spend some time on that, making some partnership, and until somebody told me like, they don't have money themselves, they're chasing their own money. So you have to know that. That's just something you cannot know if you start with fundraising. Mm-hmm. So it's really complicated, and also because that's not really my expertise. It's more like education and knowing how to run the things, maybe like communities, how to grow community, maybe technology, but not like finances. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Is there a way, like, or have you thought about ways to maybe create a business model around it? Like, for example, a Streetwise did. I don't know if Streetwise.
So he has a good model, I think,
So
because
his
he is sending those and they go and live on a street for 2 days and they learn from the skills from those kids living on a street, which is great. It's a closed circle. But I know that it's really tough for him due to COVID. People are not able to travel, so he has no income as well. So for him, the circle isn't closed anymore right now. So that's really a shame. I know that it's really tough for him, rough at this moment. I've been thinking about this for a long time. So if you're listening right now and you have some solution, do feel to reach out to me. And my hope is also with the app that we will find some close circle on that as well. Yeah. Because in the end, we are doing good stuff. I don't think you can argue with that. We're trying to change people's behavior and we are having some impact. I'm really convinced about that part. Some impact you are not able to measure right away. It takes some time. So yeah, let's try to find a way. Yeah.
No, yeah, and I'm definitely also thinking with you. Like, I talked to you about the impact coin that I was working on, and I think that's definitely something that could help with that as well. So just wanted to let you know that together with our listeners, we're gonna keep thinking and keep working on that as well. Another completely different question in the sense of what would you say personally, like you're investing a lot of time and energy in all these things and money, like you said, but what are you like proud of stuff right now?
I guess I already mentioned. So with the refugee school, I'm proud that it was really tough. It was a really bumpy road. So it started with sending my own laptop to a camp, which was stolen. It was creating a partnership with a local NGO and they lost interest. So it was always starting from scratch. I think I must have said 5 times what am I when I had to start really from scratch. But we ended up with an official partnership with the UN, with our own school, with 100 laptops over there, with solar panels. So it's a 100% carbon-free infrastructure over there. Even the UN is using those solar panels. You have to know that it's in the middle of the desert. So 1 month of internet connection has a cost of $3,500 over there. And still we found ways. So we are giving free electricity to the UN and they are giving free internet to us. So we had a goods exchange technology, which is really created for those kind of circumstances. So we found a small server, which allows me to push instructional videos and educational resources to it when there is a tiny little bit of internet connection. And when there's not, they are able to use that device for 50 laptops. So they are able to learn from the teachers in our community by watching videos. And they have access to Wikipedia, even when there's no internet connection. And you just have to know about those kind of technologies. Nobody knows about it, that those things are being developed. So that's one thing I'm proud of. The other thing is more that I think that I found a structure. If I would die right now, I'm pretty sure that this project, the climate action project, will still be growing by making sure that we have some key figures, key persons. We have a really good structure of ambassadors. In every country, we have one key person who's lead the project in their country. We have facilitators who are guiding the other teachers. And we created a nonprofit in Florida a few years ago. So everything is in place, I think. So it's still able to grow.
Yeah. This is very interesting. So all these ambassadors, are they all on voluntary basis working with the project? How do you keep people engaged around these things? Because I can imagine in the beginning, they're like, let's do something, and then it might fade away.
Yeah. So my part was like in identifying people who are not doing it for gaining a certificate or like a badge. Many people are participating for that reason. Before they even started the project, they are already asking like a certificate. Now, I always thought, why would you need a certificate? It's not even like a paper, it's like just an artifact, a digital artifact. But then a teacher and saying me, yeah, because of this certificate you made, just like took half an hour to create something on my computer. But because of that certificate, our students were able to go and work outside of their country. They were able to find a job because of that certificate. So for me, it's just like worthless. And for them, it's like, it means the world. Also in India, they really are doing those kind of things. But also like in Belgium, as a teacher, you get a job. You never have to do any teacher training or any, you don't have to do any training. But like in other countries, like in the US, you have to do training and you have to get some credits in order to remain a teacher, basically. So that is part of the deal. You have to do that. And that is basically in every country except for Belgium. So those certificates, they do count for those credits, which I didn't know. So for the teachers, and it's interesting, it's for them, it's like professional development. For the students, they are even able to get some kind of a job because of participating in those projects, which I didn't really realize. But to come back to your question, it's basically identifying teachers who are not doing this. For them, it's like an entrance inside of them, it's some kind of a motivation. And they're doing it because they really believe, it's like that, those kind of activists, they are not being paid to go on a street. They really believe in it. So at that part I do. For them, it's like some kind of a passion, and you need to be able to identify those teachers. But for example, last year we found we need a curriculum, and we made one with WWF because we wanted the data to be right. But that curriculum was 80 pages, and that was translated to 15 different languages in 1 week. Wow. In one single week. And the teachers who did that, they were like begging for it. Let me translate it for my country, for my language. It would be an honor. Please let me translate it to Korean and Indonesian and Malay. And it was really nuts to see what happened. Yeah, we had a whole team, like not just one teacher, 15 different teachers willing to translate to Hindi, Arabic. Yeah, it was nuts to see what happened over there. Just for them, it's, I want to do this. I want this project to grow, really. And that is something I'm proud of as well. Yeah.
I can imagine, because I guess there's nothing like seeing a community being set on fire by the same purpose. That must be such a
and it's not like the purpose is digging gold, you know.
No, exactly.
It is, yeah, let's try to solve something, climate change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is something that you wish you'd known 20 years ago? Because you've gone through a couple of things. Like when you speak, you speak from a lot of experience. If you go back 20 years, what did you wish you'd known?
Nothing, basically. It was an interesting journey. I think I read an article once in which people were like 80 or 90. They always say to young people, make sure you're not that stressed all of the time. Relax, enjoy the moment more than being concerned about what's coming next. Mm-hmm. Don't be concerned about the future. I think that is something what I really liked, but it's somebody else's insight, I think. Yeah, but I start to get it. If you take a look back, in most cases, you have been really stressed about something, and you just have to invest time and make sure that it happens. But in most cases, that stress was not really needed to accomplish your goal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that stress comes from worrying about the future, in your sense?
Stress is interesting. If you don't have stress, you're not able to perform. Yesterday, I did my TEDx yesterday, and I was speaking with one of the moderators. And I was really curious because he has been introducing those TEDx goals for like years, and he's a professional speaker. So it's this job. And I was like really interested. Are you still stressed to do this? And he was like, yeah, if you want to do something good in your life, whether it's teaching or presenting or like just your job, and you're not stressed, at some point, you better stop doing that job, because you're just doing it because of some kind of a routine. I still don't know really if it applies to every job, but if you want to teach and you're not really concerned about the students yet anymore, which I can imagine, like after 20 years, the relationship with the students becomes a bit different. If you don't, I'm still stressed. If I spoke on conferences to 1,300 people and online to 70,000 people.
Wow.
Obviously, I'm stressed, but when I have a new classroom with 10 students in September, I'm still stressed for the first month. I always thought that was odd, but I guess that's a good thing. That means that you're concerned about them and what they think about you, whether you're delivering quality, whether you're doing a good job, but also doing more. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a trick that helps me sometimes deal with stress as well is just frame it as being excited, because they're pretty close emotions anyway. But then it releases you from, I think, releasing the fear of the outcome is powerful there. Another question in the sense of, again, like your journey, you must have had some points of failure at once. And so what would you say? Yeah. And so what would you say was your biggest one, and what did you learn from it?
One of those was like when I was 20, I went to South Africa and I've seen poverty over there. First time in my life, first time in another continent, first time taking a flight. And so that is probably why I said yes from the very beginning when I had this Skype call with Moses, and he requested to help to increase the level of education in that camp. But the months after, my only contact in the camp was Moses. And so when I sent him an email, that really took 3 weeks before he responded to that. So it was really tough. I really wanted to move on and make it happen. And it was more like my only contact was just like replying in once in 3 weeks. So it really took a long time. And the biggest failure, I think, is that every time I did something, it's just after a few months, it was starting all over again from scratch. I sent a laptop, it was stolen. I found an ally, another one, and they just lost interest. I was not the only one promising to help to increase the level of education over there. During that first Skype call with Moses, we were with 20. But after 1 month, everybody lost interest. So that was, I think, that felt some kind of a failure. But it's always like that, always like up and down. At least when you're working with those kind of things, in which not everybody is as interested. I think many people will say, "Yeah, let's help people with poverty," but in the end, it's still not everybody is equally interested to help other people. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the failures you would see come from not, how would you frame the failure in that? Is that something that you did? Or
maybe if I would have some expertise, I may have it. Maybe it only would have taken like 1 month or 1 year to gather money. I can imagine that successful people, entrepreneurs, that they say you just have to apply for that sum of money that takes 1 week, 2 weeks, and then you start a partnership with the UN, and then you build that school. Done. For me, it took 5 years to accomplish, which is fine. But I think when I would have been a professional, more like an entrepreneur and not like an educator, it would have been probably less than 1 year. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a good, I learned a lot of doing that, and it brought some good feeling. And because of the time, we also were able to grow a large community as well. We now have hundreds of teachers who are teaching for free with those refugees. We also built schools in Tanzania with Jane Goodall Institute. Yeah, in the end, all well, I think. But it may have been a bit more efficient.
Yeah, that's looking back, that's always true, right? Like hindsight is always 2020 in that sense. So I guess what you're saying is that you just started learned a whole lot from that. Is there any other resources that really helped you along the way? Or any books, any people, like things like that?
Yeah. I think an interesting part is to learn more from education. I really Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk about education. That was for me a good start. Okay, education is more than just knowledge and instruction. So for the educational part and the school, I would say that one. He passed away last year, and I think it's the most successful TED Talk ever. And another thing is one thing what I learned is you can try to find information on Google. I once needed screenshots from a tool called OneNote in English, and it took me or some specific language, German maybe, and it took me really hours before I was able to find those. But just when I posted a tweet with the same request, it just took 2 minutes, and somebody was like, "Yeah, let me take those. I have this version on my laptop. Give me 2 minutes," and just so that was some kind of an eye opener as well. Sometimes you just have to ask other people and not try to find it yourself. And once I had this relationship with the UN, and now I know it's just like WhatsApp is the key. If I'm sending an email, it still takes 2 weeks, but WhatsApp is like people can see when you read or didn't read this, and that was really crucial as well. Books. I will need to think about that part a bit. When I was writing a book about the fourth industrial revolution, we did it with 6 people, and I learned a lot from the other authors as well. And I think that's a cool thing to think about as well. So the fourth industrial revolution, we are at the precipice of that one. And the thing with that is that everything is interconnected. So we already had an industrial, which was focusing on industry. We had one on digital things, but now everything is going to be interconnected. And part of that is that today, Google can be the world's largest search engine and largest company, and Apple and Facebook. But that can change in 1 year. Next year, it can be like that Google isn't the largest search engine anymore. And I am really interested in that part, because now they're really relying on marketing. But what if there's a new browser which is faster and better, and that is blocking that kind of advertising? And it's working on Bitcoin to help farm Bitcoins. And so when you use that browser, you make money as well. I think everybody would stop using Google and use another one. But that is really interesting. And something I learned from writing that book is from the other authors, their insights as well. They're passionate about the same thing, technology and education, but still I learned a lot from them, their insights, what they did, basically.
Yeah. I think in my eyes, you really are the master of the network. You know how to connect with people and know how to create a common purpose in there that creates
so every organization is creating networks for education, like Microsoft, Google, Apple. They all have their own model in which they invite people to a fancy conference. Then they hope that they make good marketing. And after 1 or 2 years or 3 years, those teachers begin to notice, I will only be invited to that fancy conference once. So they're not really engaged. So when you create a network and you give people money or something fancy or like a device or something like that, it's just for 1 year. But when you make it about themselves and their interaction and making sure that you have a safe haven, basically, you have an online spot with friends, you're able to learn from each other. People are even posting pictures of toilets. Yeah, this is how the toilet looks in Japan. No way. What's the thing with those buttons? Why do you need those buttons? And then you, it's interesting. But everybody's good morning in their own language and happy birthday. And it's about them. It's about giving them some rewards. It's not about money. It's purpose, basically. It's purpose driven. But also my dad passed away. Oh, I'm so sorry. That happened today, Armando from Italy. And now with COVID as well, everybody wants to know, not from the newspaper, how about COVID in Italy right now? I'm not checking resources on the internet or newspapers. I'm just asking Armando. And yesterday I saw something about Sydney and issues with the climate and mud flows and water over there. So I asked Alex, are you fine? So that really gives purpose, I think. And when you become friends and try to do something together to tackle some global issue with your students, and it's not only about this wasn't success, all my students. No, some teachers are like, this is not really working. My students are not interested. This approach is not working. We don't even have vinegar to create your fancy bioplastic. That is really interesting what happens then. And that is a network for years and not just like for one year or something like that.
Yeah. And yeah, I love what you said about like a network or a community actually is really creating something that is about them in the very first place. It's like radical inclusion. It's you're joining your own network. You're not joining the network of Koen. And that I think is a very powerful thought. And I think you're very good at like enabling that and making that work. So that's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
All right, we're coming to the end of the podcast, but I have a couple of more questions that I always like to end the podcast with. They're kind of rapid fire, so feel free to just shoot them. But before we do that, maybe if you could step into my shoes, is there anything that I like that you wish I asked you that I didn't?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered everything what's important in my life. Yeah.
All right, cool. Then quickly as well, if everybody wants to shoot you their brilliant ideas for a business model, where should they connect with you?
Okay, you can find me on social media, Twitter, my name is Zelfstudie, or you can send me an email on timmerskoen@gmail.com. Yeah.
Okay, I'll link that in the show notes. And then the last three questions are, what do you do to help yourself think impact on a daily basis?
I think for me helps is interaction with other people, being inspired by other people. Yeah.
And what advice would you give to people who want to go out there and lead their communities and start maybe like their own community, just like you did?
Make it about people, make it about purpose and not about technology and you.
And so what do you think it takes to become an impact billionaire?
I think stepping outside your comfort zone and thinking outside the box. Yeah.
All right.
And you always have to don't try to replicate, don't try to do what somebody else is doing. Don't try to create a new Facebook in order to have success. Try to start from an issue, something what's going wrong, and try to find a solution for that, but your own solution. Yeah.
Then maybe the final one is, if you could create a billboard and get a message out to like millions of people, billions of people, what would it be?
Join us. Join us.
That's brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much, Koen, for this very inspiring interview and or podcast conversation. And I'm sure we'll be hearing from you a lot in the future still to come. And I hope we can work on some projects together. But in the meantime, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.